Hello, everyone. It is Thursday evening, and we are back for another Author's Dilemma show. And we're coming to you live on Facebook. And hopefully, if you're listening to us in your car, you're going somewhere awesome and you're enjoying our show. So tonight we are first off, let me introduce myself. I am J.E. Jack, and I write horror, paranormal thrillers, and I'm currently almost finished with urban fantasy, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit.
I'm Hiram Hawks, and I write hard sci-fi and hard sci fantasy.
And I am Jennifer Carr, and I write Christian romantic suspense and clean contemporary romance.
And before we get into the meat and potatoes of tonight's show, let's talk about our business. It is time to talk about what's going on. So, Hiram, what's going on in your world?
Well, I keep getting distracted by other topics. Like I talked last week, I am a chaos gremlin. So I am continuing. This is where writers groups have been very helpful because they force me at least once a month to write the thing that I'm supposed to be writing, so I can submit it to my writers group, and so that's happening. But yeah, this week's mostly been chaos and just personal life stuff like job hunting. So I did get some writing in, not as much as I'd like, but I had 2 job interviews today, so maybe I will not go broke.
So, excuse me, everyone. So tell us about your writers group. What's expected of that, and how often do you meet, and how do you even find them?
Well, I had 3 writers groups because I'm psychotic, but I have 2 right now because one of them kind of broke up because a person's dying. But that's she's 80, so it's not unexpected. Yes.
I'm speechless on a podcast this evening, so okay.
But yes, writers groups are a fluid thing. I have two writers groups that I'm actively doing. I met one of them. I actually re-met a person from high school. I ran into her randomly at the Life, the Universe, and Everything convention I guess that would be just over a year ago.
Oh, that's cool.
And got her info so that, because I'm like, oh, you're a writer too? I wasn't until recently. And so we started a writers group with, so she's hasn't yet gone into writing. I won't give her name because she hasn't chosen a pen name. She's got her books almost done. But then I chose to approach Dan Kenner, who's an author active on TikTok and has his own podcast. He's great, and so he's in that group with me. And then we've recently added someone else, and she's got a pen name.
So how does it work though? Like, you meet how often? Once a month?
We meet once a week in that group.
Oh,
My
wow.
other one meets intermittently, like 2 to 3 times, every 2 to 3 weeks. That one I met through a class. The best 2 places to meet the people is at conventions and in class. The great part on each group is totally different because the one that's once a week, we each have a rigid rotation. We take turns presenting 5,000 to 8,000 words, and the other 3 people read it, leave comments, and then we talk about it. The other group, it's once a month, and it's kind of a free-for-all. All of us read everyone's, if 2 to 3 weeks, once a month, whatever it is, we read everyone's work. Tends to be a lot more words, maybe 10,000 to 12,000 words, and we still do it. We spend, that one's 2 hours every few weeks. You can really play it up. The main thing that makes a writer's group successful is if you follow some key advice. You're not supposed to give them the how or the what to write. You're supposed to give them the emotions you felt and what you thought was not what was wrong, but what you felt was wrong. Like, as in, I felt disconnected from the character, but you don't tell them why you were disconnected from the character. Writers groups derail. I learned this trick from Brandon Sanderson and Dan Wells when they claimed they ruined someone else's writing career for a time, because this was their very beginning writers group when they were still in college. They told him how to fix it. But that's not the book he was writing.
Right.
So it's all about giving your perspective.
Just
as
honest
a writer,
feedback at that point.
Honest feedback, and not telling them how to do it. And that's made all the difference. The writers groups have been delightful, and the more than anything, it's the motivation. Like, you will write because people are counting on you.
I don't know. That's too high stress for me at this
A
point.
lot of pressure. Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
No, it's
work
funny
to meet
because
deadlines.
it's funny because I'll write these books and just send it out in the world, but heaven forbid if I have to actually have to sit in a group and watch you read it,
Yes.
like
Yes.
Oh, they
instant
read it
feedback.
ahead of time. Don't worry.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
No, the real challenge with that is that you do have to take some responsibility for the deadlines,
Right.
but the rewards are so worth it because especially if you can find a writers group of people that are enough different than you. Like I have one group is more fantasy, one group is fantasy and sci-fi kind of. I give my sci-fi book goes to my fantasy group, and my fantasy book goes to my more sci-fi oriented group. And that way I get a different perspective. I don't want yes men. I don't want them to be like, oh, that's so
right.
cool. No, I want people who are like, well, it's not my genre, but here's what I thought was great, and this part confused me. I'm like, oh, that's so much more helpful.
Yeah, that's interesting, and especially since sorry, Jen, I cut you off.
Yeah.
Oh no, especially since you shared with us, your story that you were writing. I was like, yeah, that's not something I usually read normally, but I thought it was really well done. And same thing with Jen. So Jen, tell us about what's going on in your world.
Honestly, it's been a slow week. The productivity hasn't really been there, and it's really funny that we're talking about editing tonight. I had a conversation with my editor, and then it was followed with a conversation of frustration with my husband because our communication. Now, keep in mind, my editor is my sister, but we have a contract, and I pay her, so it's not like she's just family, and that's something we can talk about later. But I was having a conversation with her, and I was really frustrated with the lack of work that's been put into what I sent her, and I'm like, I'm on a deadline. I've sent you my dates and that kind of thing. And so I've just really been trying to find an easy way to approach that. And I've been stressed out about that.
I hope she doesn't listen to this podcast.
Maybe she will, and this will be the way I don't have to confront her. No.
Yeah, a little passive aggressive. Hey, I think you should listen to this. We talked about editing tonight.
It's not that I'm being passive aggressive. It's just I don't know how to say, hey,
right.
I know that you have a job. I know you have a family, but we have a contract, and maybe I wasn't clear. Maybe my expectations weren't clear enough, and that kind of thing. And so that has been very distracting because the conversation we had was, I said, I know my this book that you're reading right now is a little boring. And she said, no, it's just really heavy. And I was like, okay, well, how do I fix it? And she's like, well, lighten it up a little bit. And I was like, that's how you make things less heavy. You lighten it up. And so anyway, I'm just like, how do I do that? So my thoughts have not found their happy place yet. So it's been a week.
That's kind of like, calm down.
Yeah. Don't tell me to calm down.
Don't tell me to calm down. Yeah.
What if you tell someone to calm up?
Yeah.
I've not tried that, but I don't think I'd recommend it for a woman. Just saying.
Well, see, that's interesting though, because like in a writing group, you would obviously you don't want people to tell you how to do it, but in an editing relationship, in some instances, you would expect that or suggestions on
to an extent,
right?
Because you don't want.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I've got my favorite thing, and maybe this is what we should talk about in the broader spectrum is I like my editor to tell me what's wrong and strategies, but not specifics. I don't want to be told throw in a vampire here, it'll fix it.
Right.
Because I'm not writing a vampire story. And maybe it would fix it, but that's their book, not mine.
And dragons.
And dragons.
But always dragons. Well, that's
Always
just an
dragons.
obvious.
No, but Jane, going back to what you were saying about having the conversation about expectations. I mean, heck, even and Jen is the accountability partner here, even for this show that we're doing. A couple weeks ago, she brought it up and like, hey, we need to define what we're doing and what our goals are. And that's when I was like, well, it was fun while it lasted.
He was ready to kick me out.
We made it 12 episodes and no mas, no more, joking. But no, it was a really good thing that we had. And what was that phrase you said? What was that quote you said that was Hiram liked it? Sorry, I'm totally putting you on the spot.
No, the unspoken expectations are just premeditated resentments.
That's true. Because if you don't know where you stand, problems arise. But if you already had that conversation, and honestly, nothing's changed. It was just like, hey, what are we doing? Okay, this is what we're doing. And
Yeah,
so
you want everybody on the same page, and that is so important when you form relationships with anybody, whether it's an accountability writing group or an editor or whoever you're having a relationship with. But and maybe I wasn't clear. Maybe I wasn't like, hey, this is what I need from you by this exact moment. I don't know, or maybe it's just my anxiety ramping up because I do have doubts about the work that I have in play right now. So whatever it is, and it's been a single mom week because my husband's out of town and. That's a whole different can of worms, but it's just been a week. So
yes, your hair's on fire. It's fine. It's fine.
I'll just flaunt it. It's fine. Everything is fine.
But
Yes,
those who are listening to this and not watching it, you don't understand how awesome Jen's top is with the with the hearts on it.
I'm happy. This is I need to look happy. So we're going to fake it till we make it, guys.
It's interesting. If we're talking about clothes, it's funny how clothes really do make you feel good.
They do.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I look a lot more professional in this shirt I wore for an interview than I do in a t-shirt.
Well,
I feel more professional.
Right.
Well, no, it's true. Like, the times that I've worn suits in the past, it's like, I'm a secret agent and you can't bother me.
I got
And,
a badge.
and it leads you to, interesting.
It
All
does
right.
change your mindset, though. It really can.
does.
It can change the way you think. So, yeah.
Change the clothes, change the man, right? Or person,
Woman. Mhm.
woman, whoever. All right.
Oh my gosh.
So-
what about you and your week?
Yeah, in my world, my gosh, this week it's been a long week, and for various reasons. But today I finished the first rough draft edits, for that. But now comes the second part, which is going back and revising some plot holes that I had noticed. So I'm going to try to do that this weekend. As I haven't even gotten to the whole newsletter issue. On a good note, and I did share it with y'all, that there was a hybrid publisher that put an all call this past week. So I submitted my stuff. I don't care if it comes through, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. And honestly, it's one of those things I'd rather them say no. Because if they say yes, that means that changes everything about how I do things. And but if they do say yes, well, then obviously I'll step through that door and learn as I go, just like everything else. And that's another thing that I want to kind of get across too, is sometimes, success or failure, there's change that happens with either. And sometimes we're afraid of both. And you got to roll the dice and you got to step through and you learn as you go and you get better. So if it happens, if it doesn't, it's still a good thing. So, so that's all that's going on in my world, except, and pretty soon after I'm done with that, it's going to go to the next editing stage, which is going to be my wife. And Jocelyn Jones McLaughlin says, hello. Hi, Jocelyn. I've known her since high school. In fact, she joined the Marine Corps, and then
people.
I know a lot of people. I've had a life that's taken me a lot of places, but I've known her since high school, and she joined the military, and I joined soon thereafter, and I've been friends with her family for quite a long time. So
That's awesome.
Glad that you're here with us.
Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, by the way, not only Jocelyn, but everyone else, if you have any questions, say hello, and we'll try to answer the best we can regarding tonight's topic, which is going to be editing or any other topic that we want to talk about this evening or in the future. Okay, that being done, is there any news-worthy items that's going on in the authoring world?
No,
Nothing
and
too much.
I specifically was looking for news, and I could not find anything. Like, it was a very slow week, I think, in publishing and book world.
I think everybody's kind of scared this week because it's April 1st. Right?
That's true.
April Fools. Everything you read is like,
Do I believe that?
I don't believe that. But
If you found yourself getting pranked, you should set a phone alarm for March 31st for next year
That's right.
that reminds you, believe nothing tomorrow.
That's right. Nothing.
well, what's frustrating is
Everything.
you see
Everyone
some
was
things.
faking stuff.
Yeah, like you see some things, and you're like, oh, that would be so cool. And then you're like, oh, you son of a gun.
right.
They got
What
me.
day is it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So here in Utah, a great prank. It would have worked better if they'd done some different. So the LDS Church recently bought their old temple, the Kirtland Temple, off of one of the splinter groups that formed when the church moved apart. We're talking 200-year-old history practically. And so for April Fools, someone put together that the LDS Church buys Westminster Abbey. And I just roll my eyes because, duh, that's not going to happen. But if they'd put that they'd bought the Cathedral of the Madeleine, which is the Catholic cathedral in Salt Lake, people might have believed that. And so if you're going to prank people, be realistic. You can't go for the moon. If people aren't going to believe the whole, you bought the moon. They might believe that you bought, like,
a moon rock.
The Empire State Building.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so no news is good news. And so tonight we are going to talk about... So last week we talked... If you missed the last week's episode, we talked about our processes when it comes... I'm sorry?
Shame on you.
If you didn't hear our show last week.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, shame. But, yeah, get a board, hit yourself in the head. Shame. Anyway. Anyway, last week we talked about our process when it comes to writing. And so the next phase of the game is the editing process. And tonight we're going to talk about our different, the way we do what we do. And then we'll kind of give you ideas on what editing is and the different... and editing is kind of like, the different genres. There's so many different thoughts on it. It's like, and what means one thing to one person might mean completely something else to someone else. So we're going to try to delve through that. We'll talk a little bit about that. But Hiram, what is your process after you're done with your story? Which, I mean, when you sent that short story to us, did you have someone edit that, or did you do it yourself, or?
It's different every time. So with that short story, I'd gone through it 3 times.
Okay.
And I didn't have anyone go through it.
Because I thought it was really well done.
It was.
Well, thank you. That is where being an engineer helps. I am a little bit bizarre at. I am good at spelling and grammar, except for commas. I hate commas. They make no sense. I can't grasp the rules, and don't get me started. Anyway,
I throw those suckers around like glitter. It's like commas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like an M16.
Tell me they're not.
It's going in there somewhere.
But in the short term, I do write a very clean first draft when it comes to grammar and spelling, so I can generally justify sending it to people to read it. The first person I do, so after I've written something, I almost always read it out loud to my wife. She is my pretty much only alpha reader. I'll occasionally read stuff to my kids to get kind of a teenage perspective. My wife is an interesting alpha reader because she has no skin in the game when it comes to the genres. She likes fantasy, she likes sci-fi, but she's not a diehard. She's content, she just likes reading good stuff. So getting a perspective from her is interesting, especially since she is not a math person. And so, like, when I wrote The Valley of Death, I originally wrote it in base 12, which I found entertaining. She was like, this makes no sense. I'm stuck. I can't look past it. And so I got some feedback from others later because I was like, but it's my favorite thing. And I finally had to kill that darling for the most part. She's helped me kill more of my darlings than anyone else because she is there at the beginning when I think what I'm writing is really clever. That's the first step, is that I write it, I read it out loud to someone, but that is actually, reading out loud is one of my biggest editing techniques. I will, when I write something longer than a short story, I will write a chapter and then go back and edit. And not like in the grammar and spelling sense, more of the go through and try to see what the heck I was talking about. So I do I'll do a second pass and then I'll write the next chapter. And then generally I'll go back to the beginning, fast through the first chapter, just kind of checking if it still makes sense. Generally that's where I add I start adding the foreshadowing. I start adding the MacGuffins. I start adding the things that are going to bite the characters in the butt later on. And then I do a heavier in second chapter and continue to third. Now, if I'm really in a good writing mood, I write the fourth, fifth, sixth. I'll write a whole bunch, but I've never written something where I didn't stop at about 25,000 words and go back and huge rewrite. Not even, rewrite's the wrong word. I keep most of what I've written, but I write so bare bones in my first draft that I'm adding significant amounts. I had one of my writers group describe it as like stream of consciousness almost, like
Well,
someone telling a story as they're walking.
it reminds me of a reverse onion. Instead of tearing it apart, you're putting it together.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And so I do that through the book. The middle is the hardest. I will write the last third to half of the book without stopping, almost at all.
Well,
And that's if I've made it to the 50,000 word mark, I will probably just slam to the end with no pause. So that's part of why I have like 4 books that are all in the 20 to 40,000 range. Well, more than that, but those are the ones active. And once I get over that mid book hump, then I just push through. Now, once I've got the whole thing written, I do the same thing in the sense of reading from the beginning and editing, and then going from the beginning and editing.
mm-hmm.
But I refuse. Again, I'm a chaos gremlin. I refuse to stop jumping, and so I'll put in 2 little brackets, 2 square brackets facing each other as my. This is where I left off, and then I jump and I added something, or I jump and I jump. I just jump a lot, and so anytime I'm like, no, I'm missing this foreshadowing. I'm missing this. I move around, and so I'm trying to go with my personality. You can't edit against your personality. And yeah, and
Well,
by
I mean,
the time
it's not just
that's when I'm ready to send it to someone.
right, and it's not just editing; it's everything. It's basically writing. This whole process is basically learning how it works with you, because what works for you. I mean, I can't do what Hiram does, and I don't think Hiram can do what I do, the way I do it.
Nope.
You know, and then Lord knows I can't write romance like Jen. So you know,
Yeah. So yeah, once I finally feel confident sending it to someone, like my writers group is really kind of a semi-alpha. It's not necessarily beta. It's kind of alpha beta border area, and so they get it before I'm done. And so they act as a pre-developmental edit. They're asking the tough questions. It's why I've rewritten my murder mystery book 4 times, because they keep asking really important questions, and I keep finding things on fundamental flaws in what it's my favorite story idea. It's also the hardest story idea, and so this is where an editing process needs to work for you. And so writers group is kind of included along the way. I'm trying to figure out an alternative to having a developmental editor do all of it at once at the end, because that seems inefficient. And so if anyone knows a good way of having a developmental editor
so
go
okay, so
through,
you go
that'd be
through
great.
you go through the beginning, and do you have an editor that you send it to?
Not until so far, with my first 2 books, I've sent it to the developmental editor after I've finished my passes. When it's already been through some beta readers, like full beta readers, not like writers readers, like people like you.
But when
and
you're at
Jen
that
could read it
stage,
at that point.
how much is the difference between what you send and what you get back from the developer or the develop editor?
Well,
I'm just
I-
curious. I mean,
I took, like for the Valley of Death, I took a 90,000 word book, got the developmental editor report, and added 25,000 words.
okay.
And a lot of that was description, because I have white room syndrome coming out my ears. But it's also several significant plot points, and I revised the ending. If you've read my book, you meet ghosts near the beginning. The ghosts were not nearly as important the first time in the first draft, but they become a critical point in the final draft. And that's not a spoiler. The ghosts are like literally in the first pages.
So, Jen, what is your process?
Not that.
Yeah, yeah.
No, and there's
180 the other direction.
I'm telling you, like, it's so funny to hear, because I'm thinking I could never, because one, I hate going back and rereading anything I write, which is so bizarre, but I hate it. And so,
Me too.
isn't that crazy? And so I'll finish a first draft, and I will go through
Straight through?
Yes, like now it depends.
Crap.
Sometimes I start at the end and then go back to the beginning and then write the middle. But yes, I will write the whole thing before I go back and reread it at all. I might like read a chapter to catch up if I stop mid-chapter or I need to know where to jump off, but I'm not going to go back to the beginning ever on purpose. And so I'll write the whole thing, and then I will read it the next day after I've typed the end. When I am at the end, I'll read it. and then I will send my editor a message and say, hey, I'm ready if you're ready. And I'll send it to her. And her first run through is just to make sure that, like, am I on the right track? Are there plot holes that I've missed? Like, because sometimes you're in your head, the whole story, and maybe you've
Mhm.
left something off the page. And you're like, no, I put that there. You're like, no, I imagined it there. And so she will get back to me. And this is where we had the conversation where she was like, it's really heavy. Like, your first part of the book, I really thought he was one way. And then I get to the middle and I'm like, he's a different person. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So that's where we had a conversation. So anyway, I just kind of that consistency. And so then I'll go back and I'll read it again after she's given me that feedback, and I'll make some edits, whether it's word choice or maybe expanding an idea or something like that. And then she'll get it back. She'll look at the parts that I've changed, right? She'll look and see if, where
Mhm.
she's made notes and stuff. And then I send it to beta readers. This is where I use my beta readers.
Right.
It is not a final product. There are going to be grammatical errors. There are going to be punctuation. My point for sending it to the beta readers at this point is to say, hey, what are you reading as a reader, right? What am I missing? Because, again, I have a different perspective on this book and these characters. So what are you seeing? Then they come back to me and I've got a form that they fill out that says, hey, this part was slow. This part was too fast. This part didn't make sense. There's a hole here. This doesn't connect. And so then I will take it back. I will make edits, and then it goes back to my editor, who will check all the work. And that's where she does all of the copy edits. We're doing grammar, we're doing words, we're doing all the things. And then I'm done. Like,
Mhm.
once we've worked through that, if she comes back and says, hey, maybe check this one more time or something like that, but then I'm done.
Mhm.
And then I'll read it again just to make sure that, I haven't left out a word or changed a preposition or whatever. But
Right.
that's my process. It's yeah.
That sounds insanely risky.
Why do
Yeah,
you say
that's
that?
To me, because you've written a whole book, and I don't even know how to. It just feels like you're hanging over the abyss,
Really?
and you haven't. Maybe it's the engineer in me, but I'm double checking my trusses. You're building into the dark, and you build across, and you're just going on faith that you're going to reach the other end.
But
And I'm
I have.
building and
I
double
don't know.
checking my trusses every pass.
See,
Well, I don't
see,
know.
I don't find it that strange at all, but I
Really?
find yours, Hiram, to be
Yeah.
really scary
Well,
for me because
that's why I'm glad that
I
there's
can't do it
different
that way.
people.
I mean, it sounds, yeah, like I can. So my process is, so the alpha readers, like I send them every 5,000 words, and it's gonna be name's gonna be wrong, timeline's gonna be wrong, but I send them every 5,000 words, I send it to them, and then they keep, hey, is it still interesting? Is it still keeping interest? And then once I'm done with it, then I will go back through. Like I don't go back to the beginning at all. Kind of like Jen. Once I'm like a train. I start slowly. I build momentum. I build momentum. I build momentum, and I keep going. I keep going until I am finished. And then once I'm finished, then I'll go back to the start. And I use Pro Writing Aid to kind of catch a lot of stuff that I miss, like commas. Even though I use or overuse some, like, hey, you don't need a comma here, stupid, and then I take it out. Or some readability issues I'll check, and so I'll do that. And then once I'm eh, kind of like what I'm doing now, I'll go through the first draft, and then I'll see what plot holes that I'm missing. I'll go back and fix that, and then once I'm finished with that, I'll send it to my editor, which happens to be my wife. And thank
Cheating.
goodness. No, oh no,
Too
I mean,
easy.
no, I am very grateful because she does. I mean, and we'll talk about it here in a little bit about the different kinds of editors that there are out there, but she does it all. I mean, she line edits. She makes sure all the dates are correct. If I'm referencing something, then she makes sure that it's actually correct. Um, and the nice thing is she'll if something needs to be changed, she'll write it in red and see if that's good. So she does a really good job. Which, by the way, she's for hire.
My editor is not. You can't have
Yes,
her.
yes. Well, I mean, I write so infrequently. I mean, not infrequently, but my books take me 6 months to a year to get to that point of editor. So, um, Maybe she's not. Maybe if she's heard me in the next room, she's probably going, "What?"
Shut up.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's my process, and so when I get it back from her, then I'll go through the thing again and see if if it and then she constantly. I mean, then she's always asking me like, "Well, what do you mean here? What's going on here?" And so she's my first like real reader, and then I'll send it to the beta readers, which will collect because no matter how good a proofread or edit is, there's always going to be some small. There might be formatting issues. There might be a misspelled or a word that is correct, but not in that way. Not in that because the English language is so odd anyway. In fact, I had 2 or 3 books out when I started going to audiobooks, and when I was following the narrator, making sure that he was reading each word correctly, I found even more proofreading, like more, editing issues, which, at that point, it's less than 2%, 1%, which, you want to try to put your best foot forward and, have as, when you put out a product, you need to have it as best you can. But regardless of that, it's the best you can do. It's, it's never going to be perfect. So
Yeah.
that's my process.
The enemy. This is actually a good spot for this quote. The enemy of good enough. How does it go? The enemy of good enough is perfection, or the enemy of success is perfection. Really, there's a time when you got to say good enough. I'm butchering the quote, but as an engineer, it's sometimes terrifying to know that my designs go out and can literally be life and death for people. But that's part of why we have so much training, so much really what amounts to apprenticeships. You've got to spend time on making things good, but there comes a time when, you can't do any more. The law of diminishing returns is pretty steep. So with a book, no one's going to die, hopefully. And so just it's like you got to let it go at some point. Like honestly, that's the hardest part for me, is knowing when I've done enough edits. And maybe that's part of why I go back and edit as I go, because I can do that fast, and so it doesn't really slow me down, but it also means when I get done, I can be confident I've got something that I'm proud of.
Right.
And so let your editor will also tell you, if you have a good editor, they'll tell you if what you wrote is crap. And that's again, that's part of why I love having the alpha beta type writers group, because they can tell me when they're just confused at from the very beginning.
And when it comes down to the edits and the proofreading and just the minor stuff, you just want to make sure that you're to the point where it doesn't take the reader out of the story.
Yeah.
Because I've read books in the past where someone did not take the time to do basically anything, and that gets me out of a story quicker than it's like, oh, that's wrong. Oh, that's and then I put it to the side, and then I'll never read them again.
Right.
Yep. The hardest was when you read. I've been doing some ARC reading for people who are not native English speakers, and they can't afford necessarily to have someone proofread, and it's really hard because sometimes they just don't know how to make it sound like real English, and that throws me out of the story completely. So,
oh, it's crazy. I saw something on TikTok, not on TikTok, but on like Instagram Reels. I guess back in the like 62 or 72, there was an Italian singer that made up words that sounded like English, but they weren't. And it's and it was so weird to watch because it sounded like English, but the inside of me was irritated because I'm like, it was like a discombobulation in what I'm hearing and what I'm like trying to comprehend, and I knew it was gibberish because it said so. Like, oh, the 19th, this person did this, and it's like, oh, and so that's what happens when you read a book and it doesn't make sense.
That's so funny. It's true.
It's beautiful. That's
so.
True.
What is editing? Let's go to the next step because we're over
no
the 30
one
minute mark.
knows.
No one knows. Everyone does it. In fact, Jen made this beautiful editing PDF, which it's good.
Check it out on her website.
Free resources, and you want to go through it?
Oh, it's on my website, jcarwrites.com/free-resources. And I didn't put it up here to go through the slides only because I wasn't sure we were going to have time to go through the slides. We're already at 34 minutes.
Well, I think the most important thing to say is, even with her resource, we found very quickly that other people don't agree. And if,
Right. So
there's more opinions.
right. So basically, you have proofreading editors, you have copy editors, you have developmental, the editors, but then also you have something called line editing, which kind of to some people sounds like it does it all. Where they go line by
Line by
line and they
line.
check. But so that's why you need to talk to your editor and make sure that what you both are agreeing on, because if you go, and that's another thing,
contract
where
needs to
where
be
do you
specific.
where do you go get your editors from if you're not fortunate enough like myself to be married to one?
I haven't
Well-
figured that out fully yet. I really like the editor for the Valley of Death, but she's a college student, and so she gave me a good deal. But she's a college student. She doesn't have time for me to do as much editing as I might want to do. So I haven't figured it out. Fiverr, I don't recommend unless you get some pretty good samples and your expectations are very clear. You really do get what you pay for.
Right.
One of the hard part is developmental edits. For example, for my book, which was about 110,000 words, I was looking at $3,000 for a traditional developmental editor in the U.S. I could do it for $300 on Fiverr, but it's not the same because they just weren't putting in the same effort, and for good reason. They're only getting paid $300. That's not a lot of time. And so if you can't afford it, there are some really great developmental editors that'll work with you on payment plans. But if it's just not in your budget, then that's where I will again say writing groups can bypass the need for a developmental editor if you do it enough. And that requires you to do a lot of reading of other people's stuff too. It's a give and take.
Yeah.
So
I also think that, like you said, it was a college student. I mean, someone that's trying to build their portfolio, yeah,
give me half price.
Yeah, I mean, you can go to a local school and see who's, wanting to do that, and there's different ways of doing it. Same thing for graphic design.
Pay for it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I will say that my first series, my Christian suspense series, I found my editor for that one. It was not my sister. It was on Readsy.com. And I love Readsy because you can go in and you can set your genre, you can set your expectations, you can even, I think there's a budget setting that you can put in there. I will say I paid $5,000 for her to edit my book. It was like a 9-month process. It took a very long time. But she also had 20 years experience. She worked in a publishing house for one of the big Christian publishing houses. She has her own series of books that she's written and that kind of thing. It was a fantastic experience for the first go around because she also taught me a lot about myself and about writing in general. After that, though, I couldn't shell out $5,000. I mean, I still pay $3,000, right now, but it's an all-inclusive. It's developmental, it's copy, it's line, it's proofing, it's all of that for the same price because it's friends and family discount. But I do think I get the better end of the deal. But there are places like Readsy that you can go and find somebody who will meet your needs, and they will give you multiple options. And you put in, you send them samples, they send you samples. And that's the other thing. Always see who you're working with.
Right.
Like get samples of their work so you know what they're capable of and that they're not going to take your work and destroy it and make it their work, because it still needs to be your work in the end.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can also find if you go to indie authors that are in your genre that you write, that you'd say are the competitor is the wrong word, because I think we're all actually together if you can connect to people, but that's a different conversation. You're going to find their editor might be your future editor.
Yes, absolutely.
Doesn't work so well at the big publishing houses, but if it's another indie author and you like their books and you think they're well edited, their editor might be a great option.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of hybrid publishers. So if you do go the hybrid publishing route, they also can provide editing with their services.
Right on.
Oh, yeah.
All
and
right.
that does bring up one more time. I want to emphasize this. Your editor is not the writer.
Right.
Don't let them change your book.
That's right.
You let them change the mistakes in your book by pointing out to you confusion, pointing out boredom, pointing out to you disconnects. Broken promises are one of the biggest things, and that's really what I love for my beta readers, is to find my broken promises. Because when you write at the beginning of the book that you're going to talk about the Dark Lord and his obsession with antique chicken tureens, you know what? That better come into play at the very end of the book. And if it doesn't, you're going to have angry people who want to know what the heck those tureens had to do with anything and why they were at the beginning and not at the end.
Actually,
I don't know where that came from.
now that you talk about that, I'm gonna have to fix something in my book about chicken tureen. no, but there is something I gotta close the loop on one of my things. But all right, so we are 40 minutes in. I think we've kind of beat this editing dead horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So
but if you have questions about it, I mean, you'll find the answers.
Heck yeah.
And take joy in it. Editing does not have to be miserable.
That's right.
No, it really isn't. I mean, because going back through it and reading it, sometimes it's, well, it's 50% like, holy crap, I can't believe I wrote this. And then the other half is like, oh, geez.
I can't believe I wrote this.
Horrible. But you can write it and fix it, and that's kind of the cool thing, because you're really reliving your story. But all right, so everyone, thank you so much for spending your time with us. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at authorsdilemma@gmail.com, or if you have, kudos or critiques, or if you're learning something. And as always, we're always on Facebook. You can contact us there as well. Until then, we will see you next week. I hope everybody has an awesome weekend, and take care.
Bye.
Adios.